Hughes. Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. Well, here we are yet again on this most inauspicious and quite disgraceful of occasions today. Today marks 12 months. 12 months this government has shamefully hidden information, not just from this place, from senators in this place, but also from the entire NDIS community on the most basic of information. We've just gone through the disgrace, and I have to correct something that Minister Farrell has just said, that I voted for this legislation. Well, Deputy President, I did not vote for this legislation. I worked with my colleagues on this side of the chamber and the Greens to try and make the most appalling of bills remotely tolerable. And while we've improved it, it is still a disaster for those on the scheme and those in the endless queue now of people who are not being accepted into the scheme and those people who should have been. So it has now become very clear with Minister Shorten's announcement that he is leaving this place, why he tried so desperately to hide the information. Still no government report on the review, even though he's squeezed this legislation through this place. We still have no detail of what sort of assessment process. We haven't even got a plan to develop this yet. We've got no idea of what foundational supports will be. We've got no agreement with states and territories, as Senator Hughes just said, who are absolutely outraged, not only with the lack of transparency by this government, but also with the lack of detail. And yet we had National Cabinet last week, on Friday. And here I thought, right, let's have a look at the communique. There will be something about the NDIS, something about discussions and agreements with the states and territories on the future of the NDIS. And how are they going to afford it? What are the states and territories going to have to provide in terms of foundational supports? What are they? How are they going to fund them? Who's going to take those people with significant disabilities who have their services cut on the NDIS or don't get in at all? 3 pages of National Cabinet communique and not a single word about the NDIS. So given the disaster that this minister is now leaving behind, and the fact is he's got his legislation through, but he has left an enormous mess. So after 2.5 years, when we were in government, offering to work with Bill Shorten and the Labor Party as the Shadow Minister to start addressing all of these problems that had then become apparent in the scheme that needed fixing 3 years ago. They said, no, there's no problem with the scheme. And then they've wasted the last 2 years doing a review that was entirely unnecessary because we knew what the problems were. We needed a government that had the competency and the ability to be fully transparent, to work with the Greens, to work with us on this side of the chamber, to work with the sector, to fix the scheme, to make it sustainable and to ensure those who needed this scheme the most seriously and profoundly disabled in our communities, and make sure that states and territories lived up to their end of the bargain to support the remaining 4 million people in Australia with some form of disability and provide that in the community. They have done none of that. So what will Minister Shorten now do? He will be praying for an early election so none of this comes out, so he doesn't have to release his government response to the NDIS review, because that will show that this legislation does not implement the review. So despite what this minister has just come in and the claptrap, the legislation that this place passed does not implement a fraction of that review. If Minister Shorten had any decency, he would resign today as minister, as he is leaving, and the government would put, if they could find a single competent minister in their ranks to start making the changes. Instead, they will keep spinning and spinning, and thousands of Australians on disabilities will be all before us.
Senator Scarr.
Thank you, Deputy President. At the outset, I want to address those who are listening to this